Hello, and welcome to the New Mission Career Transition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Caprellian. I'm joined by my co-host, sister, and HR professional, Alexandra Caprellian. Today's guest is Mike Vincent. He is a fellow OCS classmate that retired a year ago out of the Marine Corps. He served as a commanding officer of Combat Logistics Battalion 6, and then later as an Inspector General for 2 Marine Expeditionary Force. Now he is a CliftonStrengths Coach and works for Kaleo Coaching, which is a family-owned business. And he also helps his family's HVAC business. During this episode, we talked about knowing your strengths, finding alignment, and using a different type of personality, let's call it a personality test or a strength finder, to figure out what is right for you as you pursue your transition, finding a new career, and helping your family along in the process. So stay tuned. Mike Vincent, welcome to the podcast.
It is an absolute honor to be here. Thank you, Alexandra and Chris, for having me.
Thank you.
And sis, you probably didn't know this, but Mike and I were in the same OCS class together. And so we were like,
that's so cute.
Going through, it's so cute. It's so
It was cute. That's not what I thought at the time, but
No, not at all.
I think we were back. I know. I was like, what did I get into?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's where we met, man. That was the summer of 2002.
That's right. And I want to say, like, we lost, I think we lost a third of our class by the time we graduated.
Certainly. Yeah, attrition was really high. And, something that most people don't realize, but that attrition, if I remember right, was primarily due to physical injury. Just, lower extremities and just the difficulty of the 3 PT sessions a day and the hikes and all of that. So,
yeah. I mean, hopefully they've changed it a little bit. Maybe they're not breaking as many. Maybe they're still breaking as many. Maybe they need to break a few. I don't know. I just know I know that's a chapter of my book I'm about to close here pretty soon. Well, look, Mike, I'm very excited to have you on as a fellow Marine, somebody that I know, and we've intersected during the course of our careers. And you transitioned out and retired from the Marine Corps, almost a year ago, right?
Yeah, about 13 months, actually. September 1st of 2023 was my official retirement date, but the ceremony was in June of 23, and I was on terminal from June to September. So yeah, it's been a little over a year.
All right.
Congrats.
Well, hey, so just to, congratulations. To get the listeners oriented a little bit more who you are and where you came from, let's start with a softball. Where did you grow up?
Well, Oklahoma is where I was born, but my family moved to the St. Louis area in Missouri right as I was starting high school. So my high school years and then subsequently at the University of Missouri, that's kind of where I claim now. So the St. Louis area, St. Charles, Missouri is home. And that's where I kind of grew up and in what we call home now.
Cool. Why and how did you join the Marine Corps?
Well, it's interesting because I think the short answer to that, like for so many of us, was September 11th. And, that really is the context. And, when we met in the summer of 2002 at Officer Candidate School, I was a history student at the University of Missouri at that time. And one of the few things I remember from my history degree at Mizzou was that context is everything. And you can know what somebody did or what happened on a particular date, but you'll never understand why it happened if you don't understand the context. So the context for me, like for so many of us, was September 11th. But couldn't actually get to Officer Candidate School until summer of 2002, just because the lengthy process it takes to apply and be accepted and all of that. So context is everything, right? And when I went to OCS in '02, not really sure how I was going to respond to that. I had no military in my family history, so I didn't really have a frame of reference other than movies and TV and the commercials for the Marine Corps and what the recruiter that I met on the campus of University of Missouri told me. But I really found that I thrived at OCS in terms of just the dynamic environment, the being pushed into leadership roles, kind of pushed out of my comfort zone, the high level of energy and focus. That really appealed to me a lot. So after OCS, I still had to go back and finish my degree for my final year of college. But as soon as my degree was earned, I got the commission and it was off and running from there.
And an 0402 logistics officer, right?
That's right. That's right. I got to the basic school and I assumed that the entire Marine Corps was infantry. I didn't know anything about the different MOSs. And I think there's probably other people out there that are like that. You know, that you're at the basic school and you start hearing, oh, there's pilots here. Okay, I knew that. I knew that one. But then you start hearing about, engineers, right? And artillery and logistics. And when I learned about the logistics MOS, that was speaking my language. That MOS resonated with me from the very beginning for a lot of the reasons that we'll talk about today. I think I'm just naturally wired to like to come alongside people and other organizations and say, what language do you guys speak and how exactly can I help support what you guys are doing here?
Yeah, and that's it. That's kind of the role of the S4 officer in most battalions and regiments, right? I mean, you're there to, and sometimes it's thankless, right? Nobody really cares until something doesn't show up when it was supposed to.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And to me, I'll always thrived in that role, whether it be an infantry battalion or a flying squadron, or a logistics unit, or some other weird unit, to be able to come alongside and just immediately try to size up the situation as quickly as I could and see what makes them tick and see where their common problem areas are. And that's where the logistics MOS and other MOSs, but you start to see that different units have the same problems. And then different organizations within a unit will experience the same problems at times. And it takes a generalist, I think, to be able to kind of stand back a little bit and be able to say, oh, look at this. Do you guys realize that you're having the same problem down in this section as they're having over here, or the same problem this squadron is having, its other squadrons having the same one? And to be able to synthesize those things into the core issues that are going on, I just loved that. And to this day, I still love doing that and kind of love that generalist process, which the logistics MOS and many others get to fill that role with the units that we've been a part of.
That's good. Yeah. No, I think you're speaking my language.
No, I am. And I know for engineers, it can be a little different because, whether you're with that direct support role at a CEB, or whether you're, in that more general support role, the character of that can take on different flavors. But certainly in that general support role, I know engineers and other combat service support MOSs and combat support roles get to get that same sense of problem solving and looking across multiple organizations to find trends, which is fun.
I think some of the skill sets maybe not the skill sets, but let's say that the requirements of the job, they naturally intersect into that staff role, regardless of what logistics type MOS that you have. Hey, what was your last duty station?
Well, I'm here in North Carolina still because I retired out of Camp Lejeune. My twin boys are seniors in high school this year. And so we're going to let them finish out, though I retired last year Ultimately, we will end up back in the St. Louis area. That's the plan for next year after the boys graduate. So we're still here in Camp Lejeune area. I retired as the IG for 2MEF was my last role, the Inspector General for 2MEF, which was a role that I never thought that I would have as my final job, but absolutely loved that job and got a lot out of that. And before that, I was the CO of Combat Logistics Battalion 6, which was, of course, the job of a lifetime to get to be the battalion commander there for CLB 6. And that was from 2020 to 2022. So that was my last couple of jobs, my last duty station. But, we got a chance to go all over during our career, from the time we met at OCS in 02 and then finishing my degree at the basic school in 03, was in Okinawa by 2004. And from Oki went to 29 Palms, from 29 Palms went back to North Carolina. From North Carolina, the Marine Corps saw fit to send me to Monterey, California and teach me to speak Korean, if you can believe that.
You? Really?
That's right. And then I ended up in Korea for Korean Command and Staff College, which the whole family got to go. We had a phenomenal experience doing that. And from there went to Hawaii, which was good because I got to continue using my language skills in Hawaii. It was good for a lot of other reasons too. It was Hawaii, but got to kind of sustain the language, was back in Korea many times, TAD, and doing different training things with with MAG 24. And then ended up back out in Lejeune to take command of CLB 6. And unfortunately, since that time, haven't been able to sustain my Korean language skills the way that I wished, but it's not all gone. It's still there. And I get my flashcards out occasionally, but we got to bounce all over during our career and just absolutely loved every duty station, loved the overseas time, but ended up back here at Lejeune. And like I said, ultimately we'll be back in Missouri once the boys graduate from high school.
Okay.
Nice.
So you've had like this, an amazing career, and thank you for the overview. I didn't know you went to DLA and learned Korean and went to the Korean
DLI.
Command.
Yeah. The
DLI,
Defense Language
right.
Institute. Yeah.
Not Defense Logistics Agency.
No, although I joke about DLI because it really is such an amazing group of young people that are, that become those crypto linguists and other intelligence MOSs that are language trained. And being there as just an exchange student, I was already, a major by the time that I went there, quite a bit older than the rest of the population. And I was in class with entry level, junior enlisted, sailors, soldiers, Marines, and airmen. And sometimes felt bad because, here's me kind of like, wow, I'm only in charge of myself. I'm learning a foreign language. I come here and I'm getting paid to learn this language. This is great. But the young people that I was in class with, their MOS depended on them, doing well with learning this very difficult language. And if they didn't pass their course, they were going to be recycled. Or in the case of the Navy, I learned that if the young sailor didn't pass her language course, she would still be sent to a ship just with no MOS. And I asked a Navy friend of mine, what happens to a sailor when they report into a ship with no job training? And he says, you already know what happens. She scrapes paint and she swabs the deck. And I thought, so these young people were dealing with a lot of stress associated with getting the credentials they needed to go do their jobs. And here's me just like, hey, who wants coffee? What a beautiful morning in Monterey it is. And I realized, I was like, oh man, what can I do to help encourage? What can I do to help encourage these folks to tamp down the stress levels? Because the stress was a killer. If you were dealing with high levels of stress or anxiety, you were not going to learn a foreign language. It's not going to happen. It shuts down the learning process dead in its tracks. But if somehow you can create a culture, a little climate inside your little classroom that has everybody laughing at themselves, relaxed, free to make mistakes. I mean, it was really a big reminder for me and a lesson, right? That if we can focus on keeping people dialed into a positive mental attitude and a positive way of thinking, even when they're failing a quiz, even when they forgot to do their homework the night before or whatever, you're still going to get more return on that energy than you would with an alternative approach. And it's still a competitive environment, and everybody knows that. It's competitive, and you do need to pass your quizzes, and you do need to do your homework. But motivating people to excel, as we'll discuss, you get far more bang for your buck by using those positive attributes and avoiding the negative, neurotic behaviors that come along with anxiety and shame and guilt and stress and all of those things that we all deal with, especially during transitions, which I think is particularly relevant for what you guys are doing, because anytime we're going through a transition, I think that's when it's most critical that we do a little self-alignment and understand that there's going to be a voice in my head that tells me I'm no good, or I'm a quitter, or I'm not qualified. And those are the voices that we need to drown out and replace with something that's much more empowering, much more focused on what we actually bring to the table, and start to claim that and take some ownership of it. And that's really what, I learned that. We learned that 1,000 times in our experience in the Marine Corps. And to be able to come alongside now after the fact and realize, oh, there's a lot of folks in professional environments who've been doing this for a while who have not learned that, and to be able to kind of introduce folks to some of that thinking that I've been a beneficiary of has been a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to getting into that.
I mentioned, go ahead.
What was your reason for retiring out of the Marine Corps, and, what was your game plan?
Well, I said earlier, I remember learning in my history degree about context. And one of the big pieces of context about me that I didn't mention earlier is that when my family moved to Missouri, we started going to a little church down the road, and I fell in love with a girl there who became my high school sweetheart, who's now my wife. And while we were dating, her dad became a true mentor of mine in many, many ways. And he came to me one day and said, "Oh, so you're dating my daughter, huh? Do you want a job?" And I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to teach you heating and air conditioning. And you'll be my apprentice. I'll teach you everything you need to know to get you certified HVAC." And so that's what happened over the course of the next several summers and even into college. And it wasn't until September 11th that I started kind of seeing my calling shift a little bit because of the context of what was going on, because of the circumstances in my life and all of our lives. But up to that moment, Mr. Liber, who's now my father-in-law, had a heating and air conditioning business, Liber Heating and Air Conditioning, and he taught me the trade. And so that context and those relationships, obviously, I married my boss's daughter, and me and Mr. Liber have stayed best friends ever since. So as my Marine Corps career progressed, my family, both sides, my parents and my in-laws, were very supportive of that. And it was probably 3 or 4 years ago that my father-in-law and I were talking, I think it was over Christmas, and he said, "Hey, you know how much we love and respect what you're doing in the Marine Corps, but if and when you decide to retire, we could use your help. And we want to keep the heating and air conditioning business a family-owned business. We want to keep it running, but we know we're going to need help to hand this off kind of to the next generation, as it were." And that I really felt like was a shift for me in my calling. And what I mean by that is I think when we talk about vocation, which, by the way, comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call, that there is an intimate connection between the vocations that we enter into and what we're feeling called to do. And that calling, I don't believe that calling is lightning from heaven necessarily. I think that calling oftentimes are the sometimes obvious, but maybe subtle circumstances that we're in. And I know it would have been easy for me to say, oh, my father-in-law is talking about his heating and cooling company again. I'm going to stay on the path that I'm on. But I felt like just because of the way that I'm wired and also the context, he's a mentor of mine. It's family, that was a clue for me that I needed to listen to and I needed to respond to. I felt my calling shift in that. And so, that's exactly what I decided we were ready to do was shift where our energy was going to be focused. And it timed very well with what I felt like I came into the Marine Corps to do. And I truly felt compelled after September 11th and seeing so many people joining up, so many young people joining up to go overseas, that I felt like that if I went as well, I could help in some way, that I could do something that would be helpful for somebody. And, I'll tell you a quick story where I really feel like that resonated. And that was in Afghanistan in 2008. I was a captain by this time, and I was the for 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. So the logistics officer for this infantry battalion. And I had 2 motor transport platoons that worked under me, and they were, as you can imagine, all over southern Afghanistan, delivering supplies and doing God's work there with sustaining our Marines. I rode along as often as I could. And one day I was riding along with one of those Motor T platoon commanders. We were approaching our objective to deliver supplies whenever a squad from that particular platoon who had been patrolling in the village hit a roadside bomb. And, the doc inside that vehicle, the hospital corpsman was killed, and the Marines inside that vehicle were thrown away from the vehicle during the blast, but suffered some pretty horrible injuries and burns. In that moment, we were able to send a group from our logistics convoy down into that blast area and start to cordon the area off, treat wounded with our doc. Their doc had been killed, and prepare a helicopter landing zone to get folks out of there. Horrible situation. The vehicle was in such bad shape and was still burning that it took us many, many hours before we could put the fire out, get everybody out of there, put the vehicle on one of our trucks, and then finally get into the forward operating base, which was our original objective for the resupply. When we rolled in, the sun was coming up. We had been out there all night dealing with this issue. And it was just a squad from the platoon. And I was keen to go find the lieutenant, the platoon commander, because he had just suffered great loss, lost one of his docs, lost several of his Marines who were now wounded and being treated. And I just wanted to go put my arm around the guy and tell him that I loved him and tell him, hey, we're here to help, man. I know it can sometimes be annoying when the logistics section shows up with all this stuff, but hopefully you are receiving it as we're here to help, and I want to help however I can. Well, as you can imagine, the lieutenant was very downtrodden, didn't want to talk to me, didn't want to talk to anybody, even though I'm trying to encourage him. And I said, I'm the logistics officer. I'm here to help. What is your number one logistics problem here on this base that I could maybe help with while I'm here? We're delivering the supplies. We brought the things that you asked for, but what's your number one thing that you think I could help with? And he looked at me skeptically and he said, oh, you want to help, do you? Okay. I got an air conditioner over there that hasn't worked in weeks. If you want to help, how about you go fix that air conditioner, tough guy? How about that? And as you can imagine, my eyes lit up and I was like, I can probably fix that point me in the direction of the air conditioner. And I was able to fix that air conditioner for him that day. And there's no greater satisfaction for a logistics guy to see this infantry platoon commander say, that was pretty good. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Anyways, the ability just to say, okay, there is something positive that we can do in this terrible moment. There is something productive that we bring to the table, even when things are at their lowest and their worst. And if we can just focus on that and find an opportunity to put our unique talents and strengths into the fight, regardless of how negative the circumstances are, then we're going to start to take baby steps towards engagement, productivity, positive mental attitude, cohesion, and all those things that we know are so good for an individual and for a team. Now I'm the one rambling on.
No, that's awesome. Well, let's get into it. Like, what are you doing now?
So the heating and air conditioning company is now my focus on a daily basis. I told you I'm still in North Carolina, so the heating and air conditioning company is back in my hometown in St. Charles. So a lot of what I'm doing is just the things that can be done remotely. It's those financial, insurance, administrative, payroll, things that can be done, but also promotional materials and advertising for the company, and just telling the story of this family-owned heating and air conditioning company that's been in St. Charles for over 30 years now, just doing great things for the community. So that's my primary focus. But as I started to communicate with my family that, hey, I am going to retire, I'm going to be coming alongside the heating and cooling company. My brother, who Alexandra, I think you'd get along with really well. He's also been in an HR role for many, many years at a few different companies. He works for Edward Jones now as an HR professional there at Edward Jones. And part of what Edward Jones, like many other Fortune 500 companies in recent years, Edward Jones incorporates Gallup's CliftonStrengths as a performance appraisal and coaching tool for all of their employees. And so my brother got certified to do the CliftonStrengths assessments and coach people, but also coach managers on how to coach their subordinates, their direct reports, in the context of their strengths. So, Cap, we would call this a really, really good counseling program within Edward Jones. It's the Edward Jones mentorship program and the Edward Jones counseling program. I don't think Edward Jones would mind me characterizing it that way, but it is their favorite way for supervisors to give good feedback to their direct reports and their teams. So my brother's been doing this for Edward Jones for a number of years. And over the course of that, had friends in his community, other business owners that he knows, that says, would you come do that for my chiropractic clinic? Or would you come do that for our bank branch? Or would you come do that for our restaurant team? And so my brother said, yeah, I can do that. So he started his own, call it a side gig LLC about 8 years ago, called Kaleo Coaching. And although his day job is still doing employee onboarding and managing the CliftonStrengths coaching program for Edward Jones, he somehow finds time to service a lot of clients in the St. Charles and really throughout the state, giving CliftonStrengths assessments and then coaching people on what it means and how it can boost engagement and productivity in their teams. It really comes down to encouraging employers and supervisors to give good, meaningful, positive feedback to their teammates and to their subordinates. When Dan heard that I was retiring, and my brother Dan, and eventually coming back to St. Charles, he said, will you help me? Will you help me grow this coaching business that I started? Because he's got a number of clients now, but there's a lot of potential there to do a lot of good in our community with regards to something that's so simple yet so hard, as you know, Cap, giving good feedback to our folks, whether that's within our families. I owe it to my kids to give good feedback to them that encourages them and empowers them. And then if you're a boss, if you're an employer, if you're a supervisor, you owe it to your team as well to give good feedback, set aside deliberate feedback. CliftonStrengths is our favorite tool to do that. And so I've been able to help my brother add a couple clients over this last year, and also just put the word out that we're looking to grow, and we love the fact that we have day jobs. I'm a heating and air conditioning guy. Dan works at Edward Jones. We're practitioners. We're literally applying this on a day-to-day basis in our own companies, but we love to share the word and spread the gospel, as it were, of strength-based feedback for our teams and how powerful it is. Example with the heating and air conditioning company, we've revamped how we do annual reviews for everybody, the annual performance appraisal. And now it is specifically strengths-based, where everybody's top talents, the naturally recurring ways that they think and operate, are a focus for the feedback that they get from me or from the owner of the company. And that, I think, is just a different way of doing business. Critiquing, critical feedback, that's got an important part at times too. Sometimes that absolutely needs to happen, where you say, hey, you messed up. I need you to do it this way next time. But I think there is no replacement for the benefits you get out of saying, I saw you in your element on the phone the other day, and you were so good as you were engaging with that customer. Or I saw you out there adapting to changing circumstances on a job site, and you managed risk so well, and you were so professional in your approach. For supervisors to give that kind of feedback we all want that kind of feedback. And CliftonStrengths is a great way that gives a language, gives a language for people to say, well, what do I tell them? Well, that's the beautiful thing about the output reports that you saw, Cap, when you took it. It's a whole very well crafted language around people's talents and their recurring ways of thinking and behaving that are ready-made, by the way, ready-made for someone who's writing a resume, or writing an application to compete for something, or writing a performance appraisal in order to give somebody meaningful feedback.
Yeah, so for clarity and for Sis and for the listeners, Mike was kind enough to give me a link to take the CliftonStrengths assessment. I think we'll call it that. And so, first of all, and you, Mike, you correct me where I might be going astray. It's a lot of questions, and you only have 20 seconds to answer them. And actually, I understand it. I think it's a very smart way to provide a test to somebody, because I reflected back on my emotional state as I was going through it. You do have to sit down, and at some point, like it was maybe a third of the way through, it was only at that point that I realized I just stopped thinking about the questions. I didn't put more than a second into it. And I think it was a really smart way to generate it, because the problem is I know that the longer you take to think about it, the worse it gets. It was almost like I hit a certain fatigue level where I stopped thinking, and I just went instinctually. And I think the instinctual responses were really the reason why I ended up getting this profile that was, I'll just call it eerily good. It was eerie, like looking, and there were very few things where I would look at this and say, well, I don't know if that necessarily fits with me. But having been somebody that I know, I'm an INFJ, and there's a good Myers-Briggs type indicator is pretty good. But to a certain degree, it kind of, having done it, it left me wanting a little bit more clarity. Like, this is interesting information, but then you go through this kind of rote, hey, these are the occupations you should look at. And I'm like, why did none of these sound very interesting to me at all?
Right. And there's so many tools out there like Myers-Briggs and others that are good tools. And though we focus on the CliftonStrengths assessment as our favorite tool for a lot of the reasons you just said, and the number one bit of feedback we get, the most common thing we hear, is someone says, you nailed me. That's me. You got me good. And I think the power in that is that, for us, when we see the top 5 talents, which is the assessment you took, was the top 5, there are 34 total talent themes in Gallup's CliftonStrengths. The top 5 are the ones that really are most prevalent for you. They bubble up the most. They are your favorite tools in your tool pouch that you reach for without thinking. And since we do it without thinking, it can be helpful sometimes to deliberately carve out some time to think about it. And it takes, I think, an assessment like this for you to have the black and white report in front of you to say, well, yeah, that is me. So what? One of the things about CliftonStrengths that I really like is that it's kind of task agnostic. And what I mean by that is it's not so much going to tell you what you should do now. You should take a job like this, or you should do this. It's more so saying, when you are confronted with a challenge, when you do have a task that you need to accomplish, you are at your best when you're reaching for one of these 5 favorite tools that you utilize. And if you can understand how valuable that tool is and start to apply it in a deliberate way, then you get a little bit of a positive mental edge on how you should approach challenging times, like a transition, to say, well, I want to lead with, in your case, I want to lead with my responsibility theme, or I want to lead with my learner theme, or my arranger theme. Belief, I think, was your number 4, and analytical, your 5. Okay, analytical, your 4, and belief, number 5.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't necessarily labels. In fact, Gallup discourages using these as labels. They're clues. They're tools. It's also doesn't mean that you can't reach for a tool that's lower down on the list. You absolutely can. It just may require a little bit more deliberate effort on your part, where these top 5 are things that you do naturally. These are things that you don't grow tired of. Alexandra, did you see Chris's results by any chance?
I have not.
I'm
I'm very interested in seeing.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see what your thoughts are, and you're maybe not surprised to hear that Gallup, CliftonStrengths, has determined that Chris is very driven by a sense of responsibility and core beliefs about things. Those tend
Not
to,
surprising.
yeah,
At all.
and that he is an analytical learner.
Yeah.
That he wants to analyze things into their component parts to better understand them. But the beautiful thing about Chris's top 5 is that, so many of us can be analytical. My brother is a very analytical. Analytical's in his top 5 too. And we Marines, we know something about analysis, because, maneuver warfare theory has a lot to do with, we call it orientation. John Boyd, if he were on the line with us, he would talk about orientation and how the orientation process is about analysis, but then synthesis. And that analysis is good, but only if it's followed by a productive synthesis of something new. I broke things down into their component parts. I've learned about them. I understand them better now, but now I need to create something. Now I need to build something. And this is where, Chris, your top 5, you are an arranger. You are someone that is good at analyzing, good at learning, good at that strategic thinking piece. But then when it's time to bring it all together and to put things together in a way that they best work with one another, that's what that arranger is in you. And so that's a great combo. And I think John Boyd would be very proud, because it's both analysis and synthesis in your top 5, which is very powerful.
Yeah.
Now I want to take mine.
Yeah.
I got you. I'll send you a code, Alexandra, because it's also very fun to see, particularly as you guys produce this podcast and collaborate with one another, how your strengths complement one another and how your strengths might overlap in some ways. And my brother Dan and I have done that before, where we put our strengths together, and Gallup has some really good tools out there that I could share with you guys that that shows some unique ways that two people partner together, and how their strengths are even more powerful when you collaborate in that way. The magic of this really is in teams. If teams can come together and respect one another's differences with regards to their top talents, then it unlocks a whole lot of potential that otherwise you might be tempted to be frustrated by somebody's different approach. You don't do things the way that I do them, and I don't understand why you see it that way. Some of these things that we struggle with in teams because of the diversity of teams, but we all know through multiple case studies that diverse teams are so much better than teams that don't deliberately build for diversity. And this is really what Cap, your arranger theme is all about, as Gallup, CliftonStrengths defines arranger, is to be able to put a diverse group or components together in the best possible way to maximize their productivity. And that requires respect for people's differences. And we know that to be true, but there's a neurotic part of our human nature that can sometimes get suspicious of people's differences and whatnot. And when we can get past that and start to invite others to contribute to a team in alignment with their natural talents and strengths, you unlock a lot of power there, and you understand the problem better now. Much like the blind men and the elephant that are all standing on different parts of the elephant and describing the elephant. One blind man says, "Oh, the elephant's like a snake," because he's feeling the trunk. Another blind man says, "Oh, this elephant is like a tree." Another one says, "Oh, this elephant is like a brick wall." All of them are correct, but all of them are incomplete in their understanding. And I think that's such a great proverbial metaphor there for what happens when we come together and combine our unique talents and our unique perspectives about a particular problem in order to better understand the problem and then move forward with decision making and problem solving.
So thank you for just kind of coaching me. Thanks for coaching me. I mean, like give me an explanation of it. So this is what I think, and let me try and frame if we're going to give a sales pitch to service members that are preparing to transition, this is what I think the value is. And you tell me if my answer is incomplete or something I'm not thinking about. So I've got the top 5 profile, and really what it tells me is, as I'm reading through it, it made me think of the times that I felt most alive in my military career, most alive in my personal life. And it was very thought provoking because it made me realize, like, hey, these are the things that really speak to me. Like, if I'm trying to, and a lot of us are in a position where we're like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And it, like you said, it's not prescriptive, but if I understand what are my core drivers, what are my strengths, what makes me feel alive, and most importantly, the report has amazing things like associated with one of your strengths, it'll tell you what to be wary of. I can almost use that as a filter and say, like, hey, this is what I think I want to do in the future. I know I want to go into supply chain management because that really satiates the analytical side of me, the strive for efficiency. But I also, when I'm interviewing for positions, it's my opportunity to make sure, is this a good culture fit for me? Is this position going to give me the opportunity to really play to my strengths? Because I see this as an amazing filter. It's not prescriptive, but it's an amazing filter and a guide point on where I want to go. And am I what I'm looking at as far as doing in the future? Does that really align with my strengths?
That's right. Yeah, that you well said. Because whether it's a supply chain management job or whether it's some other job, the key is to be able to, first of all, you can articulate who you are in a way that aligns with what used to be called soft skills. And you might be aware of this, but there was a time when we talked about soft skills. These were your resilience. This was your communication skills. This was your adaptability or your analytical. I don't know if you've picked up on this, but in the last year or so, that idea, that domain of skill sets is being rebranded and they call them durable skills now, because a lot of, I think, organizations and employers got the wrong impression when they heard soft skills being described as an important thing during the interview process and in the selection process, building teams for a company. Now they're calling them durable skills because they're trying to make it clear. And Forbes magazine had a great article on this last year. This is exactly what employers need to be specifically looking for now. We're specifically looking for people that are learners, that are adaptable, that are analytical, that are resilient, that are good communicators. These things that we intuitively know, these things don't become obsolete. Some of your technical skills might. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning right now is going through a big industry change with the type of refrigerant we're being used. The technical skills are changing as we speak. That's true for any industry, and we know that to be true. New technologies come out, technical skills are always going to become obsolete very quickly, but these durable skills do not. And for you to be able to articulate who you are in the context of these durable skills, and for an employer to say, we really need somebody who thrives off of analytical decision-making processes, or who really thrives on the core values of this organization. You know, Chris, for you to be able to find an organization, maybe it would be a nonprofit, who knows, where the core values are something that you hold so dear that you unleash a pool of energy that makes it to where you never grow tired of the sometimes menial tasks that'll go along with whatever job you get. And that's true for all of us. All of our jobs have those menial tasks associated with them that aren't as fun as other things. But if we can tool our brain to associate even those menial tasks with something core about who we are, well, now I've associated fixing an air conditioner with adaptability, or with maximizer to improve a process, something that now I can make a mental connection and I can think about my job in a way that maybe I previously hadn't thought about it before. At the end of the day, that's how behavior changes, is we have to change the way we think sometimes. And this tool is a great way, I think, that calibrates the way that we think. I use a Marine Corps example here that you might relate with on the pistol range, Cap. Whenever I first qualled on the pistol range, I barely qualled. I barely qualled. I had my pizza box, my marksman badge. I could not figure out pistol marksmanship. Years went by, and now as a captain, hoping to qualify, I'm on the pistol range, and a sergeant, one of the combat marksmanship coaches, is watching me. And he says, "Sir, stop looking at the target." And I said, "What are you talking about? How am I going to shoot my pistol and hit that target if I don't look at the target? Of course I have to look at the target." And the sergeant said, No. Stop looking at the target. The target's right there. You're standing in your lane. It's right in front of you. Stop looking at the target. You need to focus everything on the alignment of your sights. Lining up that rear sight with the front sight post on that pistol is what it's all about to actually shoot expert. Stop worrying about whether or not you're going to hit your target. Oh, am I accidentally shooting on my neighbor's target? Am I accidentally shooting over there? Stop worrying about that, because when you do that, you actually look around your sights inadvertently. Ever so much, you're looking around your sights and you're throwing your alignment off. This to me is such a fun metaphor about what this process of self-alignment can do for an individual, to say, honestly, it matters less what you transition to in terms of that specific role or job. What matters more is how you're thinking about the role that you're transitioning to. And if you can approach that in a cognitive way that says, I'm bringing to bear everything that's good about me, and then the reciprocation of that future employer saying, we want you on our team because of those top strengths and talents that you bring to the fight, then that's an alignment a self-alignment that unlocks a lot of power, I think, and helps us get rid of the neuroticism that really can plague a lot of our transitions. And now I'm talking about the guilt, the shame, the anxiety, those things that we all have to struggle. We all struggle with those. But to be able to replace those negative chronic ways of thinking with something that's positive and empowering is the number one thing I think someone can do as they approach their transition. Declare war against neuroticism, right? And that maybe that's not the best word. Declare war against the chronic negative thinking that's so tempting for so many of us to do. And instead say, no, I'm going to choose to align myself with my best strengths, my best talents, because we all have them. And I'm going to aim those in the direction of the challenges that are before me.
Thank you. And I think that's a great point to end on. I mean, I think that's it. That's what we should be focusing on. Hey, Mike, if others have questions and they want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch?
Email would probably be best. I'm at mike@KaleoCoaching.com. So Kaleo Coaching is my brother's company. We coach individuals and teams in the Missouri area, but outside of Missouri as well. We've got clients out here on the East Coast as well. And that's really a testament to what my brother has built over the last few years. And the fact that he would invite me to be a part of it is an absolute honor and pleasure for me to be able to come alongside what he's doing. So my email address is mike@KaleoCoaching.com.
And I'm sure people can also find you on LinkedIn. We'll make sure that your LinkedIn, but more importantly, your email address is provided in the show notes. Talk about honor and privilege, Mike. It was an honor and privilege to have you come on our podcast. Thank you so much for your time and for your amazing stories.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be in touch. And Mike Vincent has left the recording studio. Sis, I know that went on. Your thoughts? I didn't ask you what questions you had, and oops, sorry.
No. You know, something that we mentioned, when it was over, and that I just wanted to ask him really quickly. What we know here in HR is KSAs, or knowledge, skills, and abilities. And, that's something that we really like to follow when we start looking at what we need fulfilled in a job and what people can bring to fulfill those needs. And it's just so stark. There's nothing really personal about it. It just feels not human. And when you started talking about, the CliftonStrengths assessment, I just started realizing that it is such a human approach to the exact same outcome. And it actually, I feel like, would be able to reach a lot more people if they were able to take this assessment and able to compare what their outcome is to a job posting, because it opens your mind into newer possibilities. Because there's so many times where somebody would come up to me during something that I don't have a lot of experience in, and they'd say, "Oh, you were really great at XYZ. You did this. Did you notice that?" And I said, "No, I didn't notice that, actually." And it was this whole systems thinking of being able to map out what this one outcome could be compared to the other one, and then how we can make it work in cohesion with each other. And I didn't know that I was doing that. And somebody had to say that to me. And I think that that's just another great opportunity for people to kind of be proud of themselves, of what they naturally do. And that'll give them a jump start into their new transition.
Now, that's really interesting. I'm writing down KSAs, but hearing your critique of it's very informative.
Well,
I want to see what you get. So check this out. And this is the other thing that I had, because you don't see the 34 criteria. All of these, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, are copyrighted. It's copyrighted by CliftonStrengths. Don't try and jack them. But so my top 5, so they've got 34 strengths. They're broken into 4 different categories: executing, influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking. So, and mine only fit, my top 5 were only in 2. It was in executing and strategic thinking. But there are some like explanations that weave into relationship building and influencing. First of all, the top 5 is good because if you follow the Pareto principle, you're looking at the top 20%, which is going to have a disproportionate effect on all of the things, probably 80% of the success, right? So I think you're looking at 5 out of the 34 is probably the right number. But looking at it from a business application standpoint, imagine that you're looking for somebody that has just like maybe a couple of the hard skills that you're looking for and meet some of the other criteria, but say you need to inject some energy into, let's say, a department or a section. They've got a strength here under influencing. Whoa. I don't know what it means, but I think it's more like Ric Flair. Woo! Like maybe you need somebody with a little bit of woo, to come in there and like spice things up, and then think about it this way. You've got different drivers for everybody, different strengths, drivers. Like the way you're going to talk to a person who's like number 1 or number 2 is analytical compared to somebody who's number 2 is woo. I mean, that should be a completely different conversation, right? I mean, like,
yeah, your approach is totally different if you have a woo person.
Exactly. So I see not only the business application end of it and the HR application of it, but when we say HR, we're probably thinking very like large. It's going to be an HR department that's going to filter down that training and that criteria for leading that coaching conversation. But I think even if you're in a mid-size or even small company, I can see the value of it, because you want to make sure that especially if the employee, or in this case, a transitioning service member, may not be aligned as Mike was describing, you can help facilitate that alignment. And I see it beneficial not only to a business, but also to the transitioning service member. Cool. So that's about it. That's all I got. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you heard and you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. That's right. If you're finishing this up, before we go into the closeout music, go ahead. If you need to give us a 5-star review, stop it, pull it up, scroll, go to the episode page, and give us that because it helps us with the metrics. Also, you can find us on Spotify. You can give us a good rating there. We would love to hear your feedback. You can reach out to us via email at newmissionct@gmail.com, and we'll take your feedback or your questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you are like me and you are preparing for your own transition, know that I'm right there with you. So until next time, stay focused.